All right, let's get started. So I'm Doyle. I am going to play very light moderation here. The stars of the show are Ed and Sachin. And today we have Beyond Automation, building the AI native enterprise. Please, once again, say hi in the chat. I'm going to say hi right now. And feel free to send us any questions that you have, or any commentary. We'd love to see it as we go along. Um, so, Ed and Gene, how about you all introduce yourselves? Ed, why don't you go first and also tell us a little bit about Machine and Partners?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ed Ortega. I'm founder of Machine and Partners. We started a couple years ago when we started to realize that a lot of AI projects out in the world were failing. A lot of companies were not doing well in harnessing this new technology, and we thought, how can we help? How can we help companies? How can we bring a process to bear on helping them understand what this technology is good at and how to actually build with it in ways that are delivering ROI rather than just being toys and stuff like that. So last couple of years, we've been mostly working on high ROI projects, things that are going to be related to the core value proposition of the company. And so depending on the company, there may or may not be great use cases for us to be involved. Sometimes there isn't, and sometimes there are. So we just learned a lot in the last couple of years, as has everybody, I think. And so we're happy to be here to try and share some of those learnings with you all.
Yeah,
So, Sachin, over to you.
yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Sachin. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO over at Elvex, and kind of very similar mandate to Ed in terms of what we're trying to help organizations do, but a different way that we're approaching it. So we come in with a platform, the Elvex platform, that really helps anybody get started with AI and to solve their kind of core problems that might sit within their team, their department, or the organization writ large. We do that by a few different things, helping them go to 0 to 1 really quickly without any technical background, helping them connect it to proprietary data that's going to fuel a lot of what AI assistants and agents can do, and then helping them with kind of orchestration, both in an intelligent way and then in a more kind of like complex way, to get these things connected to the right systems and software and to make those work. So yeah, very excited to not only talk with everybody here today with Ed too, who we're going to have like a lot good conversation around how organizations are tackling Gen AI and really this notion of being AI first or AI native.
So we have a very simple agenda here. We're going to start with making it real. I think AI native can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. We want to give you examples of like, what is this actually like in real life? And then we're going to talk about how you can build a framework and implement, what being an AI native org would look like for your business. And then we'll go to Q&A. We're hoping to do about 30 minutes of content and about 15 minutes of questions. But if you have any spicy questions, feel free to throw them into the chat as we go along. I got a DM saying that chat was disabled. It should be fixed now. If you open up chat and change the message from two hosts and panelists to everyone, you should be able to say hi. So first, we're going to define what an AI native org is. And Sachin, I'm going to ask you to do that, but I'm also going to launch a little poll really quickly. And here we go. And this is just three quick questions about your current AI kind of adoption and what might be stopping you from becoming AI native. In the meantime, Sachin, can you take it away with defining for the audience what AI native means?
Yeah, you can kind of read the words that are on the slide here, but I like to think about it as being a type of technology that's really transforming the business across the organization. So I think of it similar to when companies got access to the internet and how prevalent that was in terms of changing the way that people operated with the internet, or computers, right? So this is one of these transformational technologies where you really have to start with the overall assumption of we have to ignore what we have right now. And we have to think with this mindset of given the technology and the problems we need to solve today, what are we going to do with it? And how is that going to sit across the organization? And so we think about AI native or AI first because they get the benefit of just starting from that. They don't have any kind of legacy that they have to contend with to just get going with AI. They can start with this mentality of AI starting from ground zero with their company. And so really that is the way that I think about a company becoming AI native is can you approach your business in that same way? Ignore the sunk costs. Think about what you need to be doing with AI as kind of a first principle, and then start to evolve your business from there.
Thank you for that. We do have about 60% participation in the poll right now, so I'm going to share the results, and you all should be able to see it. Ed and Sachin, any reactions to what you're seeing here?
Yeah, this seems pretty representative of the world that we see. I would say probably there's is more AI enabled than I typically see. A lot of companies are actually not quite at the AI enabled stage even. So that's cool. And yeah, so certainly like technical expertise. I think everyone is struggling with that because there isn't a lot of technical expertise that it even exists. Like this whole technology, especially Gen AI, has only been around for so long. And then on top of that, the implementation using that technology has been around, like figuring out how to do that actually still doesn't exist. We don't know at this moment. There is no playbook for how to implement this technology like properly or the right ways, right? So we're all kind of inventing this as we move forward. And that's why like almost everybody who's using this right now is essentially an early adopter sort of by necessity.
I
So
really
I think this makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with all of that. I'm really surprised that there's a lot of people that have identified the 10x opportunity. Oftentimes that can be a really hard thing to really figure out. But it seems like what's really cool about this is it's not just a single place, but it's spread all over.
Yeah.
I am very surprised, however, that there is not a single person that put sales and marketing as the 10x opportunity because what we see across our businesses, there's a lot there in terms of how you can elevate the sales and marketing team to do way more, way quicker. But maybe that is just the kind of selection of the audience we have here. And it does make sense that there are people that haven't identified what that is yet. It's also really good that regulatory and compliance concerns aren't something that is preventing people from diving in because oftentimes we see that get in the way of being able to work with technology that is as transformational as this. And it's if you can't get access to it and use it, then that's like a whole nother problem here. So it's really good that that's not blocking anything. Yeah, it's really helpful.
All right. Let's keep moving here. And Sachin, let me know when you want to go to the next slide, but let's talk about some real examples.
Yeah. So, this is like the moment that we really often talk about where it's either the leadership or it's key stakeholders inside of a company realize how impactful this technology can be. What's really, really interesting about Gen AI is that it is one of the few technologies in the past several decades where it started in the consumer hands first, largely with ChatGPT, and it's making its way over to the business and enterprise side. And at this point, I think most people have had a experience with ChatGPT where they realize how different this technology is for them individually and what it can do. And now they're starting to realize how impactful this can be with their business in a way that is different than their experience with the consumer play. Because a lot of what is happening on the business side is not just a chat window where you can ask it questions, but it's really how integrated is it into the system and what can you get out of it as a result of that. And so that is like a moment that we see that can happen time and time again. That can be fueled by working with experts in the industry that are like coming in and helping you realize how this can be different by their own examples, of which we're going to go through a few here. But oftentimes we see this happening with the direct work they're doing with the business. Go next.
Yeah, I was just, can I add, I think that one thing that's interesting is that that we see is that it's often unpredictable. It's hard to know ahead of time exactly what the impact this technology is going to have on your business until you start implementing it and seeing it, and then you sort of awareness dawns on you like, oh, if we could do that, we could do this, and if we could do this, we could do that. And pretty soon it has kind of this transformational effect, but that transformation is hard to predict at the beginning, um, because you need to sort of get your hands dirty and you need to sort of see the tangible effect that it can have like on your business specifically.
Yeah, and that is exactly why we have these questions here, really to just like spark your brains around like what this can do and how to think about AI from a first principles perspective. And so we have a series of questions here that we're gonna like throw at you, and then Ed and myself are gonna give examples of companies that we see actually doing this. So one question here that we often think about with Gen AI is it is reducing the time to go from having an idea to having something built. And so the kind of overarching question, and it's doing that in kind of a low cost way. So the question is, what happens when the cost and speed of execution approaches zero?
So I love the guys at Elvex. I love that when we started talking about this webinar, they're like, let's start with like real use cases. Let's start with real examples. And I think that's great because oftentimes AI conversations can happen at this high level where it's pie in the sky and it's, the future and what's possible and all this stuff. But I think it's much more interesting to look at real concrete examples that have actually been accomplished, to give us a sense for like what is really possible and like what we're actually doing now, and to kind of create a benchmark for everybody on what can happen. So this is a client of ours. They are a data platform. I can't name names, sorry, but they essentially what they do is they have an army of analysts in the US, and the analysts depend on data that comes from government filings. And so they have another army of people in offshore, like roughly 100 people, whose job it is to like meticulously pick through these filings when they are filed to pull out like about 1,200 data points from each document, and the documents are about 100 to 150 pages long. It's an awful job that these people have. Um, and so what happens is because it's filing season in the United States, then the documents get filed and you have this huge backlog. And so uh, the time to data, for the analyst starts to get lengthy, and then they can't give the freshest data to their clients, et cetera. And so when they first engaged with us, the question was, hey, can we use AI to speed up this process that these offshore folks are doing? Can we help make them faster so that we can get the data in our analysts' hands faster? And then maybe if it gets really good, we can just replace all those people with AI, and that will be, a good sort of ROI for the business. Um, and so we started to look into it. We spun up a system that was very good at analyzing these documents. The documents are awful. They are not semantically structured. They have tables, they have images. And so we had to build some fairly sophisticated parsing mechanisms for the AI to actually get the data. There's information on page 3 that relates to information on page 75. And so, it's a mess. But eventually we built a very sophisticated parser that still keeps a human in the loop to validate the data, because data accuracy is really important. But what we realized was, as we were doing this, the data gathering piece, it's an offshore activity. It's relatively low cost to the overall value of what the company delivers. So when you talk about core value proposition, is the core value proposition of this company gathering this data, or is it analyzing that data and giving it to their clients? It's actually analyzing it, and you can clearly understand this when you look at sort of the cost and the prices that they charge for the various activities. So, the cost and the amount they charge for the data acquisition or the gathering is very low. The cost that they charge for the analysis and the eventual recommendations that they give to their clients is very high. So that's clearly where the value is in this operation. Automating what was happening offshore, that was great. That did incur cost savings. But what they didn't realize was like actually what they've done now is by automating that, they've freed up those people who are offshore, who are actually college educated, super smart, way underemployed actually. But in doing their job before, they got a really good understanding of what's in these documents. And so the company realized, hey, we could use these people rather than firing them. We could actually use their knowledge and have them be kind of our lowest level analysts that can do kind of some of the basic analysis work on these docs. So now we've just you know basically opened up our throughput. So we accomplished our goals of being able to get data faster. We got richer data, interestingly, because using AI to parse it out means it doesn't just go into a SQL database, but it goes into vector databases, it goes into graph databases. We can get much more interesting and interconnected data than we could before. And we've up leveled these people to make them like higher level, higher value employees, right? So all that stuff maybe would have been predictable. But then what we didn't predict was that now when you take this richer data that's coming faster, you can also enable the US analysts to work in a different way. So workflow starts to change and gets impacted. Now that US analysts can work twice as fast, they can process twice as many, projects as they could before. And then that brings up a problem for the company because if you're charging on the back of the analyst, then you're saying, okay, well, we charge $100, $200 per hour on the analyst's work, but now they're twice as fast, so they become twice as cheap essentially. And now the question is, do I charge by value instead of by time, or do I cut my price in half? And so these are kind of the unexpected outcomes that happened once we actually accomplished these tasks. And so, this was within 1 year. So now we're thinking like, what's the next step? How do we keep up leveling? And it's going to have really, truly transformative effects for this company.
Just a quick
Uh,
follow-up question on that, Ed. With when they kind of realized that, oh, hey, we can take the offshore team and like apply them to a different area, was there something that like, was it like a piece of data they looked at? Was it just a conversation? Like what was the thing that brought forward that realization?
um, what it was we did a beta test with the offshore team, right? And their job was to analyze, not analyze, but their job was to validate the data that the AI was choosing because they kind of understood like how to do that process and we're learning through that process. And we had a conversation with one of these folks, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this one's really tricky because it's related to this." It's related to this law that happens. And so you have to look at this other section of the document. And then we were like, oh, wow, you really understand what's going in this document. You're not just like picking out the data. And they're like, yeah, yeah. And so then we're like, is that something that you're often asked to do? And they're like, no, but we could do that kind of thing. And then that idea sort of bubbled up. So this was like discovered rather than, it wasn't like yeah, it wasn't that methodical. It was really like almost an accident that it came up that way.
Very cool.
Yeah. One more thing that I was going to say on that one is that last bullet point there was that expectations now from the buyers, right, are changing because, and I think this is going to start happening across every industry where it's like, hey, don't we have, isn't AI automating everything? Don't we have AI doing this stuff now? Like, why do I have to pay a lawyer $500 when can't AI do it? Shouldn't attorneys be cheaper? Shouldn't consultants be cheaper? Like, I think this notion is starting to pop up, and it goes hand in hand with all the hype
Yep.
around like AI is so amazing, AI can do everything. So then you're asking yourself, well, then why am I paying so much for for all this stuff if AI can do it all like so easily?
Yep. We're gonna try to speed things up a little bit here, so we can get through this and then leave some time for questions. So very quickly, another thing that happens with Gen AI is that it is pushing down the requirements for who could build with Gen AI, and that is because natural language becomes the way that you can get a machine to do what you want it to do. And that means if you are able to very clearly specify what you want an AI to do and how it can work, you can actually build yourself, and there are no kind of technical requirements behind it. Another way to say like vibe coding with this stuff, which we have a lot of people doing nowadays. So let's get into maybe something here that ties to that.
Yeah, so this is another client of ours that they're like an online education company. They started with a large team who was in charge of creating educational content. They had another team that delivered that content in live and asynchronous learning experiences, and then they had an LMS that manages all this stuff. And so their question was, hey, can we use AI to start, personalizing the content? We don't think AI can create the content because, we're so amazing and we know everything and we have all this great experience and blah, blah, blah. But maybe the AI can personalize the content because that was one of the main questions that students had was like, yeah, I understand the concept here, but how do I apply that to me in my particular situation because I run a nonprofit or, I'm a marketing person or whatever. And so we thought, hey, they thought we could use the AI to sort of, you know, massage the content so it applies to that particular role. And then, obviously delivering at bigger scale because of that might be helpful. So this is really a delivery question that they were interested in. But then as we built the platform out, we realized that the AI actually was pretty good at creating the content and it started to change the nature of even the platform itself. Like what is the goal of this thing? The goal is to teach someone to use AI and use these business concepts and stuff. um, we're using an old paradigm of education where there is like a smart person and the smart person disseminates in this very like broken down way, very methodically to the students. But AI enables us to work in a completely different way where it's like, well, hey, student, what's the thing you're struggling with? And given my large body of knowledge, how do I address the thing you're struggling with and use that as a foothold to then educate you inside out? And in order to do that, then the AI needs to sort of almost develop its own content to a certain extent. And so that's what started happening as we realized like, oh, we don't need all these educational, content creators. What we need like sort of content um, like Sherpas who can sort of come look at all the patterns of usage and start to kind of feed in the basic library of content around like what is the structure, the kinds of things we need to teach, less so the exact words and the exact frameworks that we want to teach on and stuff. So this completely changed like the way that they were able to scale content creation and delivery because the AI essentially replaced the LMS. We have a much more powerful profile of the student now. We can customize everything exactly to who that person is and what they want to learn. I think the ramifications for this are like astounding if you think about employee training, even education of our college students and younger students like that. So big change. And I think like just following up on what Sachin said, vibe coding for sure, but now we're seeing vibe writing, we're seeing vibe designing, we're seeing vibe automating, and so uh, it's a new paradigm and it's really changing, I think, the way that we interact with AI and the way that we produce content in general.
Great. Thank you. Let's keep it going here. So another thing that AI is really good at is it can deal with the toil and the drudgery of a lot of red tape and bureaucracy that might exist inside of an organization in a way that like people don't necessarily want to deal with, right? And especially, and we can flip over to the next slide here, especially when you're dealing with an organization that might have very high bars around compliance for good reasons. They could be working with a government agency. They could be working inside of a lot of just legacy systems that exist. How can we actually use AI to cut through this? And what would this mean for a company that might sit there with that today? If they were thinking about this from AI native, how would they get through things faster? And so this is an organization that we work with that has a very high bar around compliance. And their thought was just how do we get AI to work through compliance and give teams a tighter feedback loop and turn around time to execution? What actually happened though is that 90% of the red tape started to evaporate. And the big surprise here is those teams that ended up being the bottlenecks or blockers for a lot of that, usually on the legal side, actually ended up being the biggest proponents of this because they saw how confident AI could be at making the right recommendations. They were then able to push this forward while still keeping a human in the loop at the very end to like get the final check on this. And that actually changed some of the areas being the biggest bottlenecks to being the biggest accelerants on the business. And so again, it changes the way that we think about things that naturally for hundreds of years have been the most kind of like thorniest problems to maybe being the easiest problems to solve. And if we're thinking about that, what does that change in terms of how we orient the team, the business, to take advantage of that? Cool. And then Doyle, do we have time for this or do we need to cut this?
I think we can do it quickly,
Okay,
but
cool.
we can be quick.
So the last question here is software now kind of along the sides of vibe coding or just being able to build or execute very quickly. Software now becomes something that anybody can build. And so the question here is, well, what happens when the glue of software, the things that sit in between software, data, systems, processes, becomes more important than the software itself? What does that mean for opportunity in the business writ large?
Yeah, this it's so hard to get your head around this. I think it's even for me that's in working in this stuff all day long. But this is an example of another client of ours. It's a market research company. They essentially manage really big, complicated surveys for other clients. The problem in this world is that there's a ton of fraud in the kind of survey business, right? You have to find all these people to take the surveys, you pay them. And so because of that payment incentive, then people are kind of incentivized to essentially cheat. There's like an army of people offshore and onshore that are using VPNs and all this stuff to pretend to be somebody they're not so they can make a few bucks on these surveys. Now with AI, they're trying to automate themselves so that AI entities are taking the surveys, another version of fraud. So and managing that sort of supply of survey takers to the survey and making sure that they all get it's a big burden. Um, and so the company hired us, and they said, hey, ML is something that we want to use to eradicate fraud. Can you build an ML tool? And as we were looking into it, we said, yeah, that's possible for sure. But there's also a big workflow problem that you have with your project managers. What Sachin was saying is like there's people who have to do all this ticky-tacky stuff all day long to manage the projects. And the truth is, it's the same stuff over and over again, just a little bit different every time. And their process and their knowledge is all managed in this like heuristic model inside everybody's head. And so you bring a new person on, it takes 6 months to train them up, then they use this heuristic model. And so our question was, can we extract that heuristic model from their head, put it into an AI system, have the AI do all the ticky-tacky stuff, and elevate them so that they only show up when it's really important, when you need to have a human interaction or when someone needs to be thoughtful about how to manage this thing. And so, by automating that process, it also enabled them to create a DIY tool that allows customers to manage their own surveys because so much of the burden is now taken off of the human and put onto the system itself. And so this obviously increases the throughput of the project managers, but it also makes the surveys better because the AI is managing, it's looking at the survey going, hey, this survey is going to be a problem because you're asking this question to this audience, and there's no way you're going to be able to find that audience. So that all that glue, all that stuff that's connecting the email system to the survey system to the data warehouse to all that stuff is just piping into this AI system, which can then understand, grok that data, decide what to do because it understands the heuristics that the project managers usually use to make those decisions, and then only elevates the really important stuff up to the human.
This is like totally self-serving for me and Elvex, but it is like something we strongly believe that the platforms that are going to win over the long term are the platforms that are going to be both independent of models. So you don't have to build and lock yourself into a single model, but also will be independent from software and systems. So it's not going to just be tied to Google products or Microsoft products. It kind of has to sit at the intersection of all this stuff to allow people to build on top of the systems that they want to bring to the table. This is like where there is a growing trend around MCP servers and the ability to kind of like tie into existing stuff to build on top of it. But you need to make sure that there's like rigor around the security process with that stuff. So I think, for anybody that's in the audience here, you really have to, if you're launching with like a horizontal platform, you really have to think about, well, what does that mean in terms of the systems that matter for our company, and how do we get AI and the models we want to use to work with any system we're bringing to the table? All right, let's talk about a framework for AI native organization. And we can go into the next one here. Um, so the thing that we see most commonly with organizations that we talk to is they're usually approaching it from two different areas. They're either doing a top-down strategy, they form their steering committee, they have the executives brought in, and they're like, hey, we're going to become an AI first, AI native company, and we're going to build out the strategy that the rest of the team is going to use. Or we see the opposite approach, which is where very bottoms up. Let's give everybody access to ChatGPT and just like pray that they figure out value from this stuff. And the reality of this is that though these are both strategies that can work, usually they don't work independently because the top-down area is too kind of intent-driven, too slow, too controlled, and it doesn't give you the serendipity of like letting people discover how this can add value to their own individual role, to their team, to their department. And we think that like that has a lot of problems that exist with the org. On the bottoms up side, you have lack of like clear strategy for what should be happening, where there is like a bet around ROI. What are people doing with this? Is there transparency and observability with it? And it can become really disorganized. But and you can go to the next one here. We really think that these two things can actually go back. This is Ed's slide, but we really think these two things can be combined in a really fruitful way where you can have a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach, and it really kind of meets in the middle here to have like a very effective strategy. So I'll pass it over to Ed, who can talk a little bit more about kind of the paradigms and systems to execute and the playbooks to execute this.
Yeah, so I think that we are there's no, I know paradigm is a kind of one of those words that gets thrown around like willy-nilly, but I truly believe that we are seeing this paradigm shift in the way that sort of software is being developed, right? And part of that is because of vibe coding, part of that is because the nature of software has changed, but also the nature of software development has changed. So in the old days, that top-down method, that's what people are still kind of doing, and they're saying like, oh, I know how to do that motion, but it doesn't work in the new paradigm. And why? Because the top-down thing assumes that you have a playbook. It assumes that you know what to do. It assumes that you are the smartest people at the at the top. When in fact, oftentimes the smartest people are the people that are closest to the problem. And now those people are more enabled to solve their own problems. So how do you harness that energy and that knowledge into a more systemic approach that allows you to build something that benefits the whole organization? And that's the problem with the two sides. If it's top down, it's not close enough to the problem. If it's bottom up, it's too disjointed and disoriented, and like, there's too many hands, too many cooks in the kitchen or whatever. So you got to find that sort of middle ground where these two worlds can merge. But I think that, in the past we were engineering driven. People would hand off their technical projects to engineers. But engineers aren't always the best people to solve these particular problems with AI in the loop. Um, we were testing driven, meaning like everything had to be black or white, it had to work or it didn't work. And now we're getting into more gray area with AI where it's like it works pretty damn well. Like I'm willing to take 95% accuracy or 95% good because it's 1,000 times faster, right? So these are new kinds of trade-offs we have to make or learn to make. it Old software was ridiculously good, meaning it was like almost bug free was the goal. And now we're moving to ridiculously fast, which is like, yeah, I can get it done. I can do it myself. Like I don't need to go to IT. I can just write my own little thing, my own automation, my own code, my own whatever. Um, and in the past, human is the loop. It was like a person had to sort of be monitoring and in charge and pushing buttons and doing pull downs and hitting submit and filling out forms, right? And now the human is more in the loop. It means like they're writing with the AI, they're working with the AI to get things done, and less responsible for every single ticky-tacky thing. So this is a really different way to work that it's hard for people to kind of understand until you start doing it. And then when you start doing it, it feels so freeing and blissful.
We have a question that popped up that's related to this, which is what are the risks to be aware of with that speed?
Yeah, I mean, I think for organizationally, right, you can see. the kinds of tools that we're getting access to, consumer tools, like any consumer. Remember Shadow IT? Now we have like Shadow AI, right? Shadow IT was people using their own tools to get things done, and IT department would get all freaked out about it. And now you have Shadow AI, where people can use off-the-shelf consumer tools, potentially work without an AI policy or work around their AI policy. This is extremely bad for enterprise organizations, especially. So having some, as an organization, you need to have some kind of control over what people are allowed to do. This is why I think LVEX is amazing, right? Because it creates boundaries, it creates an ecosystem and an environment where users can work safely. They can have control over those, things. Because if you are using an off-the-shelf consumer tool and you just throw whatever, you're trying to get something done, you throw whatever data in there, you don't know where that data is going. You're breaching your policy, your security and privacy policies, potentially all kinds of bad things. You're throwing API keys in there because it told you to, or you're following a tutorial. Like, just all kinds of bad stuff can happen with that speed. You get a lot of power, right? You can solve your own problems, but then you're also putting your company at risk in this, like, in privacy and security types of ways. Also creating just like froth and messiness, where people are, one hand is doing one thing that the other hand doesn't know about, duplicated data. So, not having a bigger vision or a strategy for how to implement and roll this stuff out, how to empower people, what are the rules, what can you do, what can't you do, all that stuff is like really, really important.
Yeah, and I'll just add, agree with all of that. I'll just add, like, there is a very important step in terms of like what people, allowing people to experiment and bubble up ideas, but that really does have to connect to what the company is trying to do overall, and that can help clean up the mess in the cruft. Like, if it is not something that is going to drive value for the business, then how do you make sure those projects, those like ideas, fall to the wayside, and the wheat is separated from the chaff there. And so that is where you need that connection between the top down and the bottoms up approach.
Yep.
This was also your slide, but I'm happy to do this one if you want.
Yeah, this is for me. Yeah, I think
I
you
know that
know,
we've covered a lot of it as well.
yeah, yeah,
Already.
I would just sort of summarize this a little bit as just that, you know, um, I think that the what's happening here is we're changing the way that we work, right? Even at my small company, we now have designers who are basically building production code. We have project managers who are building prototypes. Our developers are left to work on the hard problems. The workflow that we had before, like 2 years ago, is different from the workflow that we have today. And so what AI is enabling people to do is solve their own problems. And so this bypasses some of those bottlenecks that come with organizational friction, where it's like I have to wait for somebody who has expertise to do something, and now maybe you don't need to do that. I need to wait for a tool to be deployed so that I can, work faster. Now you don't need to do that. I think the automation layer that we have now, that's allowing people to, create these automations, and probably a new skill set that's emerging around automation creation, maybe even a new role, is going to transform how companies can move a lot faster and enable their employees to harness this technology in a more powerful way than just using ChatGPT, for example. And that bubbles up as the organization starts to learn, like, oh, um, I see what's possible. Now I have ideas for how we can transform at a larger level. I think that kind of rises up more than it, starts from the top and drills down. I think that just at the top, you need to kind of give people the ability to experiment, give people the freedom to fail, the permission to fail on some of these things, so that they can learn and so that they can find those places. So it's like a little bit of entrepreneurship, inside the organization, is what that risk, that small amount of risk.
Yeah, and I'll just add, like, I think we're moving from this notion of like, okay, tell me the things that you need, to show me what you built, show me like what you can do with uh your own problem and the AI that you're using to help solve those problems. The more we get to that, the more your organization rather gets to that, the more kind of AI native I see. Because with companies that, again, don't start with anything legacy, they're starting with AI from a first principle. That is their mindset, is like, how do I inject AI into every problem that exists to help me solve that, do more faster. And that means something that's demonstrable, not something that's just an idea. Cool.
Okay, this is I think there is a playbook for how to kind of become a native AI company. So, you know, it's not, there's no magic bullet here, like especially if you are operating, if you've been around for a while, if your company is more than 10 years old, you are probably operating on the existing paradigm. Meanwhile, there's a startup that is a bunch of 25-year-old kids from MIT who basically were born with AI native tools in their hands and can, you know, write code. They're highly empowered, highly empowered. What they don't have is they don't have your experience, they don't have your relationships, they don't have your understanding of how things work in the real world and all that stuff, right? So there's a battle right now between the disruptors and the incumbents. And personally, I think the fast moving incumbents are going to win this battle because they have so much, you know, they have so much armament, you know, they have so much, so many resources at their disposal. And so, but the question is like, how do you transform yourself into becoming, acting more AI native, right? Uh, Top thing is to have a what I call a non-dumb AI policy. So a dumb AI policy is like, you cannot use AI, or, you know, we're so concerned with privacy and security that everything gets locked down and basically becomes unusable. Having an AI policy that understands the real world, where your lawyers have actually understood the technology rather than taking a fearful stance, but are taking more of like an informed stance on how to use it, is super, super important. If you don't have that, then nothing moves. Um, Giving everyone access to these AI tools. I think when everyone has ChatGPT, I think they are happier. I think they can work with higher quality, but I don't think they necessarily become more productive. I think it's only when the tools start to get cross-functional, when the friction between different roles starts to evaporate, that's when productivity starts to go through the roof in a really significant way. Um, Education, if you don't show people how to use these things, then they won't be inclined to use them. They need use cases. They need to be exposed to like how to do it. And I think once they start to see that, there's kind of, once they get over that initial hurdle of education, that's when the floodgates open, because they're like, oh my gosh, I actually see that this can help me. And then they start helping themselves, right? And then what happens is they use ChatGPT and they go, oh, ChatGPT is great, but it can't do this one thing. I want to do this one thing. It's like, oh, I want to integrate with some other system that I'm using. How do I do that? Then they're asking for that. So when you're asking for that, that's when you're in a good position, because then you're like, okay, cool. And then you can use something like Alvex. And then, you know, once you've got these systems in place and you've got all this automation going on, they're like, yeah, but you know, there's a core process that we do that goes beyond maybe what Alvex can do. And that's when you call machine and partners, right? So it's like, but you kind of want that to be a pull rather than a push, because that's when you're really going to have the right attitude for it. I think investing in automation, investing in these tools, investing in, you know, actually putting money towards it, because this is transformational. The old way is going to be disrupted. And investment means not just money, but it means time. It means effort. It means talking about it a lot, right? It's not just a cash thing. I think having strategy, it means having transformational use cases, those 10x things that we were talking about before. What is actually going to move the needle? We've spent the last year or 2 years making a bunch of toys, making a bunch of prototypes and proofs of concept that really don't do anything for the company. It's time to actually look at what the company actually does and say, if we change this, if we change this core value proposition, could we get 5x, 10x return on the money that we put into it? And I think that's very possible, as we've seen with some of our clients. And then finally, move fast. Just go. Start prototyping, start using it, invent things, show things off with other people, share with your colleagues. Moving quickly right now is so great, because you'll learn so much so fast. And the truth is, a lot of people are not moving that quickly. And I think right now, moving quickly does give you an edge that will probably start to be less impactful in the next couple of years as everyone begins to catch up. But today, I hate to be one of these people that's like, oh yeah, yeah, AI, go fast. But I think it's true. If you're ready for that kind of thing, it could give you an edge.
I almost think of it as like that's not a choice. Unless you're moving fast right now, you're going to be left behind. So it's every company's going to get there eventually. It's who gets there the fastest.
Yeah.
I think we're at time. We have like a couple more things here. But we will send this recording with the deck as a follow-up to all the attendees. So you'll have the full information that we have here. Ed and I probably can stay on for like a couple more minutes if there's any like other questions that remain. Otherwise, thank you to everybody that joined here. Really appreciate the time that you spent with us. If you have more questions for either me or Ed, you have our contact info here. Happy to chat more with each and every one of you.
I'm sorry if I jibber jabbered too much and took up all of our question time. My fault. They said go fast, Ed, and then that was I guess I'm just not very fast.
It was all good stuff, so
Yeah.
I think it was well worth it. And like I said, anybody can contact us for any questions directly. So I think that's probably it. I don't think I see anything else. Thanks everybody for taking the time today. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.